Alright, so my presentation is going to be on the presidential elections in the 21st century compared to the elections in the 20th century. So, as I just said, my topic is that. So what drew me to this topic is the very peculiar election that is going on right now, considering that the frontrunners of each party are not the typical candidates. And I hope to find out if there's any parallels to this election, to any elections that were in the 20th century. So I found so far a lot of information regarding previous elections, the current election, and what made them, a couple elections that made were really important, and I'll go into more detail about that later in this presentation. So my thesis was, although there are not any presidential frontrunners from the 20th century that can compare to the ones in 2016, there are many presidential elections from the past century that were as unpredictable as the current one. So some of the important 21st century elections was Bush versus Gore. Now this one was definitely a heated one because although the Gore won the popular vote, Bush won the electoral vote. And there actually was a 36-day recount in Florida that the Supreme Court had to eventually keep the recounts because they wanted to keep getting more recounts, but it was already almost a month and a half later after the elections. So, and also Obama versus McCain, that a recent one that's very important. I mean, because Barack Obama became the first African American president. So the current election, as you can see, is a picture of Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner, and he has no political background. However, he is a business tycoon, and he appeals to people that are fed up with the government and want change. Now Ted Cruz, he's the true conservative. Christians really like him and his beliefs. So he had a big day yesterday, a bunch of primaries. He won 2 of the 4 states. And for the Democratic frontrunners, there's Hillary Clinton, who would be the first woman president. However, there is the Benghazi scandal, which could potentially keep her out of the running if the emails prove to be condemning. And then there's Bernie Sanders, who is a self-proclaimed socialist, and his appeal is to the youth, and particularly the youth who haven't taken any economics classes. So, important elections in the 20th century. Truman versus Dewey. Now, this one's a pretty funny one because Dewey was projected to absolutely demolish Truman. And the Chicago Tribune, they actually said the day after Dewey won. However, Truman was the real winner by a decisive amount of votes. Reagan versus Carter. Now, Carter was ahead with 2 weeks left. However, Reagan's debate on October 28th changed a lot of voters' minds, and he convincingly beat Carter. And then Kennedy versus Nixon. This was the first televised debate, so that's a pretty important part in American history. And this was a very, very close race, as 0.2% of the votes determined the winner. And Kennedy won the electoral, however, Nixon won the popular, but electoral trumps the popular. And then a bunch of websites that I looked it up on, and yeah.